I was lying on the cold linoleum floor of a pharmacy, with my vision blurring and my left side completely paralyzed. The pharmacist was holding my phone on speaker, and I could hear my wife Patricia clear as day. The young man told her that I was having a massive stroke and that I might not make it to the hospital alive. I waited for her to scream, to cry, to say she was on her way. Instead, I heard a sigh of annoyance. "Look," she said, her voice sharp and impatient. "We cannot deal with this right now. The limousine is 20 minutes away, and we have a Royal Caribbean cruise to catch in 2 hours. That trip cost $15,000 and it is non-refundable. If he is sick, call an ambulance. He has insurance. We will check on him when we get back in 10 days. Then she hung up. As the darkness closed in around me, I realized two things. First, I was about to die alone. And second, if by some miracle I survived, I was going to make sure that cruise was the most expensive vacation they ever took. Before I continue this story, please subscribe to the channel and let me know in the comments which city or state you are watching from. It helps me connect with you. Also hit that like button if you think family should stick together through sickness and health, not just when the check's clear. My name is Harrison Caldwell, but everyone who has ever worked a job site in Chicago calls me Harry. I am 72 years old. I have spent 50 years in the construction business building everything from strip malls to custom estates in Lake Forest. I know the value of $1 because I have bled for every single one in my bank account. I have about 8 million of them now sitting in diversified portfolios in real estate, but that does not mean I like being ripped off. That is exactly what I was doing 10 minutes before my life fell apart. I was standing at the counter of the CVS on Main Street, arguing with a pharmacist who looked like he was barely out of high school. I was staring at the credit card reader, which was demanding a $200 copay for blood pressure medication that cost me $40 last month. I tapped my card on the counter, the rhythmic clicking sound echoing my rising frustration. I told the kid to check it again. I told him I have the Platinum plan with Blue Cross. I pay incredible premiums so that I do not have to stand here and haggle over generic beta blockers. The kid just shrugged that indifferent shrug that young people give you when they think you are just another grumpy old man who has outlived his usefulness. He told me the system says what it says, and there is a line forming behind me. I turned around. There was a woman in yoga pants holding a basket of diet soda and a teenager with headphones around his neck. They looked at me with pure annoyance. To them, I was just an obstacle. I was just traffic. I felt a surge of heat rise up the back of my neck. It was a familiar feeling, the same anger I felt when a subcontractor tried to cut corners with cheap drywall. But this time the heat did not stop at my neck. It exploded into my skull like a sledgehammer. The first thing I lost was the ability to grip my credit card. My fingers just decided to stop working. The plastic card slipped from my hand and clattered onto the counter. I tried to reach for it, but my arm felt like it was made of lead. It was the strangest sensation, heavy and weightless at the same time. I tried to speak. I wanted to say, "Excuse me, I think something is wrong," but the words did not come out. My tongue felt like a thick piece of raw steak in my mouth. A garbled, wet noise escaped my lips. The pharmacist looked up from his computer, his eyes widening slightly. Then the floor came up to meet me. I did not feel the impact. I just realized that my perspective had shifted. I was looking at the dirty white sneakers of the pharmacist and the dust bunnies under the shelving unit. The fluorescent lights overhead buzzed like a swarm of angry hornets. The sound was deafening. It drowned out the soft pop music playing on the store radio. I tried to push myself up. That is the instinct of a man who has never stayed down in a fight. You get hit, you get up. But my left arm and leg were gone. They were attached to my body, but they did not belong to me anymore. They were dead weight. I heard a gasp from the line behind me. Then a voice said, "Oh my God, look at him." I thought finally someone is going to help me. Someone is going to grab my hand. But nobody touched me. I rolled my eyes toward the sound. The teenager with the headphones had his phone out. He was not calling 911. He was recording. The red light on his screen was blinking. He was filming me twitching on the floor like a dying fish. The woman in the yoga pants stepped back, pulling her basket close to her chest, as if my stroke was contagious. She looked inconvenienced. She looked at her watch. I wanted to scream at them. I wanted to tell them that I employed 300 people. I wanted to tell them that I bought my son a $2.5 million house last year. I wanted to tell them that I mattered. But I was just a heap of old bones on a dirty floor. The pharmacist finally came around the counter. He looked terrified. Not terrified for me, but terrified that I might die on his shift and cause a mountain of paperwork. He knelt down, but he kept his distance. He asked if I could hear him. I blinked. That was all I could do. He saw my phone, which had slid out of my pocket when I fell. It was an iPhone 14 Pro, a gift from my son Brandon mostly, so he could FaceTime me when he needed money. The screen was cracked, but it was lit up. The pharmacist picked it up. He saw the emergency contact listed on the lock screen. It was saved as Patricia, my wife. He pressed the button. I heard the ringing tone. It was loud in the silence of the store. 1 ring, 2 rings. Please pick up, Patty. Please answer. I know you are packing. I know you are excited about the Bahamas. But I need you. I have never needed anyone in my life, but I need you now. The call connected. Patricia's voice filled the air, sharp and clear on speakerphone. She sounded breathless, frantic. Hello, Harry. Where are you? The driver is literally pulling into the driveway. You better not be at the hardware store again. We have to go. The pharmacist stuttered. He said, Ma'am, this isn't Harry. This is Greg from the CVS on Main Street. Your husband collapsed. He is on the floor. I think it is a stroke. His face is drooping and he cannot speak. You need to come here now. There was a silence on the other end. A silence that lasted for 5 seconds but felt like 5 years. I waited for the scream. I waited for the sound of car keys jingling. I waited for the woman I had been married to for 15 years to drop everything and rush to my side. Then she spoke. And her voice was completely different. It was cold. It was calculating. It was the voice she used when she was negotiating with the caterers for her gala dinners. She said, a stroke. Are you sure? Maybe he just fainted. He has low blood sugar sometimes. Look, we cannot come there right now. We have a flight to catch in 3 hours and the cruise departs from Miami at 5. The pharmacist looked down at me, his jaw dropping. He said, Ma'am, did you hear me? This is serious. He might die. You are his emergency contact. You need to be here. I heard a rustling sound in the background. Then I heard my son, Brandon. My boy. The boy whose debts I paid off 3 times. The boy I put through private school and business school only for him to fail at every venture he touched. I heard him say, Mom, what is it? Is it Dad? Is he pulling a stunt again? We are going to miss the priority boarding. Patricia covered the phone, but not well enough. I heard her muffled voice say, he is having a spell at the pharmacy. The guy says it is bad. Then I heard my daughter-in-law, Tiffany. I heard her distinct, shrill voice. She said, oh, for God's sake, he probably just wants us to cancel the trip so he can control us. If we miss this cruise, we lose 15 grand. The insurance won't cover a cancellation this late. Just tell them to call an ambulance. Patricia came back on the line. Her voice was firm now. Listen to me, Greg. Call 911. Get him to St. Luke's Hospital. He has excellent insurance. It is the platinum card in his wallet. We cannot do anything for him there. We are leaving for the airport now. We will check in when we land in Nassau. Do not call this number again. We will be roaming. She hung up. The disconnect sound was the loudest thing I have ever heard. Beep, beep, beep. I lay there staring at the ceiling tiles. I counted the water stains. One looks like a dog. One looks like a ship, a cruise ship. My mind started to drift away from the pain. I thought about the envelope on my desk at home. I thought about the combination to my floor safe. I thought about the title deed to the house Brandon and Tiffany were living in, the house that was in my name. Tears pricked the corners of my eyes, but they were not tears of sadness. They were tears of pure, molten rage. They left me for a buffet, for a tan, for a slide on a boat. The paramedics burst through the doors a minute later. They were professional. They moved fast. One of them, a big guy with a beard, leaned over me. He checked my pupils. He squeezed my hand. He said, "Stay with us, Harry. We got you. Can you tell me who we should call? Is there family nearby?" The pharmacist shook his head slowly. He looked down at me with pity. Pity is a terrible thing for a man like me to see. He said to the paramedic, "No. No family. He is alone." I wanted to correct him. I wanted to say, "Yes, I am alone, but I am not finished." As they lifted me onto the stretcher, the world started to go black. The last thing I saw was the teenager still filming me as I was wheeled out the automatic doors. I closed my eyes, and I made a promise to the universe, to God, or to the devil, whoever was listening. I promised that if I woke up, if I could move just one finger, I would bring a storm down on Patricia, Brandon, and Tiffany that would make a stroke feel like a gentle massage. They wanted a vacation, fine. I was going to ensure that when they came back, they would have a permanent vacation from my money. Then there was nothing, just darkness, and the rhythmic beeping of the monitor counting down the beats of a heart that was now broken, but hardening into stone. Waking up did not feel like a miracle. It felt like being dragged through broken glass. The darkness lifted slowly, replaced by a blinding white light that seemed to pulse with the throbbing in my skull. The first thing I noticed was the sound. It was a rhythmic, mechanical beeping. Beep, beep, beep. It was the only sound in the world. I tried to turn my head, but my neck felt stiff as if it had been rusted shut. I blinked, trying to clear the grit from my eyes. I was in a room, a hospital room. The air smelled of rubbing alcohol and floor wax, a sterile scent that I associated with death and bad news. I scanned the room, expecting to see faces. I expected to see Patricia sitting in the uncomfortable guest chair, perhaps looking tired, but relieved. I expected to see Brandon pacing by the window, checking his watch, but present. I even expected Tiffany to be there, feigning concern while scrolling through her phone. But the room was empty. There were no flowers on the bedside table. There were no balloons. There was not even a glass of water. There was just me, the machines, and the oppressive silence between the beeps. I was alive, but I had never felt more dead. A shadow moved in the doorway. A woman stepped in. She was not family. She was wearing blue scrubs that looked slightly too big for her, and her eyes had the dark circles of someone who had been awake for 20 hours straight. This was Maria. I learned her name later, but in that moment she was just the only human being who bothered to look at me. She checked the monitors, her movements efficient but gentle. When she saw my eyes were open, she paused. A look of genuine surprise crossed her face, followed quickly by a wave of pity that made my stomach turn. "Mr. Caldwell," she said softly, her voice thick with an accent I recognized from the hard-working crews on my construction sites. "You are awake. We were not sure if you would come back to us so soon." I tried to speak. My throat felt like I had swallowed a handful of sand. I managed to croak out a single word. "Family." Maria froze. She looked down at her clipboard, avoiding my gaze. She adjusted the IV drip, taking a little too long with the plastic tubing. That hesitation told me everything I needed to know, but I needed to hear it. I needed to hear the extent of their abandonment. I tried again, putting all my strength into my voice. Where are they? Maria sighed a heavy sound that seemed to carry the weight of her double shift. She walked to the side of the bed and placed a hand on my shoulder. Her hand was warm, a stark contrast to the coldness of the room. Mr. Caldwell, she said, looking me straight in the eye. We tried to call them. We called your wife. We called your son. We called the emergency numbers listed in your file. No one answered. The doctors had to make a decision. You had a bleed in your brain. We had to operate immediately to relieve the pressure. The hospital board had to authorize the surgery as an emergency procedure because we could not get consent from your next of kin. I closed my eyes. They did not just leave. They ghosted me while I was on an operating table. They let a committee of strangers decide if I lived or died because answering the phone might have interrupted their packing. How long? I whispered. 2 days, Maria said. You have been in a coma for 48 hours. 48 hours. Enough time to fly to Miami. Enough time to board a ship. Enough time to forget. My eyes drifted to the bedside table where my personal effects were stored in a clear plastic bag. My wallet, my watch, and my phone. The screen was dark. I nodded toward it. Maria understood. She hesitated, probably thinking it was a bad idea for my blood pressure, but she reached into the bag and handed me the device. My fingers were still clumsy, the numbness in my left hand lingering like a ghost, but I managed to grip it with my right. I unlocked it. There were no missed calls, no texts asking if I was alive, just notifications from apps, the news, the weather, and Facebook. My thumb hovered over the blue icon. I knew I should not look. I knew it would only bring pain. But I am a man who looks at the blueprints before I swing the hammer. I needed to see the structure of their betrayal. I tapped the app. The first thing that popped up was a notification. Patricia Caldwell is live. I clicked on it. The video buffered for a second, and then there she was. My wife. The woman I had taken in when she was a struggling receptionist, the woman whose debts I paid, whose life I upgraded from economy to first class. She was holding a flute of champagne, the bubbles catching the sunlight streaming through the window of a plane. But not just any seat. She was in the private suite of an Emirates flight. The leather was cream-colored, the wood finish polished to a shine. Hey everyone, she chirped at the camera, her voice high and fake. We finally took off. It has been such a stressful week, you have no idea. Sometimes you just have to put yourself first and practice some self-care. We are on our way to the Bahamas for the retreat, sending good vibes only. The camera panned. I saw Brandon sitting across the aisle wearing noise-canceling headphones that cost more than Maria's monthly rent. He was asleep, a menu for gourmet dining resting on his chest. Then the camera turned back to Patricia. Beside her sat a man. He was young, maybe 30. He had the lean, sculpted look of someone who spent more time looking in a mirror than working. He was wearing a tight tank top. I recognized him. It was her yoga instructor. The one she said was just a friend, a spiritual guide. He was sweating, presumably from the humidity of the cabin before takeoff. And then I saw it. The detail that made my heart stop beating and start burning. Patricia reached into her bag and pulled out a scarf. It was not a tissue. It was not a napkin. It was a vintage Hermes silk scarf, deep blue with gold patterns. I remembered buying it for her. It was our 10th anniversary. We were in Paris. We walked past the boutique, and she stopped staring at it in the window. It cost $800. I bought it without blinking, because I wanted to see her smile. I told her it matched her eyes. In the video, she laughed a flirtatious, girlish sound and wiped the sweat from the yoga instructor's forehead with that scarf. With my anniversary gift. She dabbed his temples, then his neck, treating the silk masterpiece like a gym towel. "Oh, you poor thing," she said to him. "It is so hot in here before the AC kicks in." I felt a bile rise in my throat. That scarf represented a decade of my life. A decade of hard work, of loyalty, of trying to be a good husband. And she was using it to mop up the sweat of a gigolo while I lay in a hospital bed with a tube in my arm. The video ended. I stared at the replay button. I wanted to throw the phone against the wall. I wanted to scream until my lungs burst. But then the phone buzzed again. A text message. It was from American Express. Fraud alert card ending in 4009. A charge of $4,500 was authorized at Royal Caribbean Guest Services. Merchant Premium Wine and Spirits Package. Please reply yes to confirm or no to report fraud. I stared at the number. $4,500. They were not just on the cruise. They were upgrading. They were buying the most expensive wine package available. While I was lying here possibly brain dead for all they knew, they were ensuring they had the best vintage Bordeaux to wash down their lobster. They were drinking my blood. Every dollar they spent was a drop of my life they were swallowing, with a smile. I looked up at Maria. She was watching me, concern etched into her tired features. She must have seen the change in my face. The sorrow was gone. The shock was gone. What replaced it was something cold and hard, like fresh concrete setting in a foundation. "Mr. Caldwell," she said softly. "Do you want me to call the chaplain? Do you want to pray?" I looked at the phone again. I looked at the reply to confirm button on the bank alert. "No, Maria." I said, my voice steady for the first time. "I do not want to pray. I want to make a call, but not to them." I typed yes to the bank. I confirmed the charge. Let them drink. Let them get drunk. Let them think the well is bottomless. It would make the drought that was coming feel so much drier. I gripped the phone tighter. The paralysis in my left hand seemed to recede, pushed back by the sheer force of my will. I was not going to die in this room. I was not going to let them inherit a dime. I was going to survive. And I was going to spend every remaining second of my life ensuring that when they stepped off that boat, they would be stepping into a world where the name Harrison Caldwell was not an ATM machine but a judge, a jury, and an executioner. I looked at Maria. "I need my lawyer," I said, "and I need to start walking, now." "But Mr. Caldwell," she protested, "you just woke up. Your muscles are atrophied. You need rest." I swung my legs over the side of the bed. The room spun. Pain shot up my spine, but I gritted my teeth. "I do not have time for rest," I hissed. "I have a house to sell." The beeping of the monitor picked up speed, matching the racing of my heart. But it was no longer the rhythm of a dying man. It was the countdown to a war. The digital hell on my phone screen was not my reality. It was their future. And I was going to be the architect of it. They moved me out of the ICU on Tuesday morning. The new room was on the 5th floor overlooking the parking lot, instead of the city skyline, which felt appropriate. My life had been downgraded so my view should match. The silence here was different. It was not the urgent beep-filled silence of the intensive care unit. It was a heavy administrative silence. The kind that waits for insurance approvals and discharge papers. But I was not waiting for discharge papers. I was waiting for a weapon. That weapon walked through the door at 10 o'clock sharp. Leonard Vance does not bring flowers. He does not bring get-well-soon cards with teddy bears on them. Leonard brings leather briefcases and the smell of expensive tobacco and cold, hard facts. We have known each other for 40 years. We played linebacker together in high school, and while I went into building skyscrapers, Leonard went into destroying people in courtrooms. He is the kind of lawyer who smiles only when the opposing counsel realizes they have lost, and right now he was not smiling. He walked into the room and threw a thick manila folder onto the bed. It landed with a heavy thud against my legs. He did not ask how I was feeling. He did not ask about the physical therapy. He stood at the foot of the bed, his gray suit perfectly pressed, his face flushed with a shade of red I had rarely seen. "You need to see this, Harry," he said, his voice low and vibrating with anger. "I thought I had seen the bottom of the barrel with your family. I thought leaving you on the floor of a CVS was the lowest they could go, but I was wrong. The barrel has a basement." I reached for the folder. My left hand was still weak, the fingers trembling as I tried to pinch the edge of the cardboard, but I forced them to work. I flipped it open. Inside were photocopies of bank documents, security camera stills, a transaction decline report from Chase Bank. I looked at the date stamp on the surveillance photo. It was dated the same day I had my stroke. The timestamp was 2:15 p.m. That was exactly 45 minutes after the ambulance took me away. And there, in grainy black and white, standing at the teller counter, was my son, Brandon. He was wearing his vacation clothes, a linen shirt, and sunglasses perched on his head. He looked impatient. He was leaning forward, gesturing aggressively at the woman behind the glass. I looked up at Leonard. "What is this?" I asked, though a cold knot was already forming in my stomach. Leonard pulled a chair over and sat down, the legs scraping harsh against the linoleum. "That Harry is your son trying to liquidate your liquid assets before his flight took off. He went to the main branch on State Street. He tried to withdraw $200,000 in cash from your primary savings account. $200,000. My breath hitched. That wasn't just pocket money. That was a down payment. That was a theft. But how, I asked? I never signed a check. I was in a coma." Leonard tapped the paper in the file. "He didn't use a check, Harry. He used this." I looked at the document he was pointing to. It was a power of attorney form. I recognized it immediately, and the memory washed over me with a wave of nausea. 5 years ago, I had an appendectomy. It was supposed to be routine, but at my age, nothing is routine. The doctors were worried about complications with the anesthesia. I remember sitting at the kitchen table the night before the surgery, signing papers, just in case. I gave Brandon power of attorney so he could pay the bills if I was laid up for a few weeks. I trusted him. He was my son. I survived the surgery, recovered in a week, and went back to work. I forgot about the paper. I never filed the revocation form because I never thought I would need to protect myself from my own blood. "He kept it," Leonard said, reading my mind. "He has been carrying that piece of paper in his personal safe for 5 years, Harry, waiting for a moment when you couldn't say no. When the hospital called Patricia to tell her you were down, Brandon didn't pack his bags first. He went to the bank. He figured if you were going to die or be incapacitated, he wanted the cash in hand before the estate went to probate. He wanted to make sure he had his inheritance early." I looked back at the photo of Brandon. The desperation in his posture was obvious now. He wasn't grieving. He was looting. He was looting the burning building before the fire department arrived. "So why didn't he get it?" I asked. "If the paper was legal, why is the money still there?" Leonard allowed a small, grim smile to touch his lips. "Because of Mrs. Higgins," he said. "Mrs. Higgins, the head teller at the State Street branch. I have known her for 20 years. I give her a fruit basket every Christmas. She knows my business. She knows I move money for construction materials, not for sudden cash withdrawals." Leonard continued. "Buron Snabana, the power of attorney. He demanded the cash, immediately said it was for your medical emergency. He told her you needed a specialized surgery that insurance wouldn't cover. He lied to her face, Harry. But Mrs. Higgins is sharp. She looked at the signature on the document from 5 years ago. It was strong, firm. Then she looked at the signature on your most recent checks. Your hand has been getting a little shaky lately. The arthritis, the loops are different. She told him the signatures didn't match closely enough to clear such a large amount without verbal confirmation from you. Brandon started screaming. He made a scene. He threatened to have her fired. He told her his father was dying and she was killing him. Imagine that, Harry. He used your potential death as a bargaining chip to rob you. Mrs. Higgins didn't budge. She pressed the silent alarm and froze the account pending investigation. Brandon got spooked. He knew if the police came, he would miss his flight. So he ran. He left the power of attorney on the counter and ran out the door to catch his limo. I stared at the ceiling. The white tiles seemed to be pressing down on me. I felt like I was being buried alive, shovel by the people who were supposed to love me. It wasn't just that they left me to die. It was that they calculated my value down to the minute. They weighed my life against a cruise and a cash grab, and I lost both times. That means the account is frozen, I said, my voice sounding hollow. Temporarily, Leonard said. He leaned in close, his elbows on his knees. And this is the part you need to understand, Harry. This is why I am here. Mrs. Higgins bought us time. Maybe a week. Maybe 2. But that power of attorney is still technically valid until you legally revoke it. And more importantly, if you had died on that table, or if the doctors declared you mentally incompetent due to the stroke, that document would have been their golden ticket. He paused, letting the weight of the words sink in. If they come back and find you in a wheelchair, unable to speak clearly, unable to sign your name, they won't need the bank's permission anymore. They will petition the court for guardianship. They will say you are unfit. They will put you in a home, Harry, a cheap one. And they will take control of the business, the accounts, the properties. They won't just steal 200,000. They will take the whole 8 million, and they will do it legally with a judge's stamp of approval. I looked at my hands. The left one was still numb, but I forced it into a fist. I watched the knuckles turn white. I thought about Brandon's face in that security camera photo. The greed, the entitlement. He didn't want a father. He wanted a payout. They think I am done, I said softly. Leonard nodded. They are banking on it. Literally. They are on that ship right now drinking cocktails, confident that when they return, you will be either dead or drooling. They think the hardest part of their plan is over. I sat up straighter in the bed. The pain in my head spiked, but I welcomed it. It made me feel alive. It made me feel dangerous. Give me the revocation forms, I said. Leonard reached into his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents. They were already prepared. He had tabs on the pages where I needed to sign. We are going to do more than revoke the power of attorney, Leonard said, uncapping a heavy fountain pen. We are going to restructure everything. By the time they dock in Miami, that piece of paper Brandon is carrying will be worth less than the toilet paper on their cruise ship. But Harry, you have to be sure. Once we do this, there is no going back. This is the nuclear option. You are effectively disowning your entire family. I took the pen. It felt heavy in my hand, familiar and solid. I thought about the 3 times I paid Brandon's credit card debt. I thought about the car I bought Tiffany when she said her old one wasn't safe for the baby. I thought about the nights I held Patricia when she was crying about feeling old, telling her she was beautiful, paying for the surgeries she wanted. I looked at Leonard. I looked him dead in the eye. I am not disowning a family. Leonard, I said. I am firing bad employees who got caught stealing from the company's safe. I put the pen to the paper. My hand shook slightly, not from weakness but from adrenaline. I signed my name, Harrison Caldwell. The letters were jagged, sharp, angry. File it, I said, and then get the real estate agent on the phone. I want the house listed by noon. Leonard took the papers back, checking the signature. He snapped the folder shut. Consider it done. But Harry, there is one more thing. The medical proxy. Right now, Patricia still has the right to make medical decisions for you if you fall unconscious again. Change it, I said immediately. To whom? Leonard asked. I looked at the door where Maria had just walked past, checking on her patients. She was tired, overworked, underpaid, and yet she had shown me more humanity in 48 hours than my family had in 40 years. I looked back at Leonard. Make it you. And Leonard, yeah? Harry. Find out who was on shift the night I came in. I want to know the names of every nurse and orderly who made sure I didn't die while my wife was checking into the first-class lounge. I think I am going to have some spare Christmas bonuses to hand out this year. Leonard smiled a real smile this time. It was sharp and predatory. Now that sounds like the Harry I know. He stood up and smoothed his suit jacket. Rest up, old friend. You have a war to fight. I'll go freeze the assets. You just focus on getting strong enough to watch their faces when they find out the bank is closed. He walked out, the sound of his footsteps echoing down the hall. I lay back against the pillows, clutching the empty folder. The silence in the room wasn't oppressive anymore. It was the silence of a calm before the storm. I looked at the clock. It was almost noon. They were probably at the buffet right now. I hoped they were enjoying the shrimp. It was going to be the last free meal they ever got from me. The iPad felt heavy in my lap, heavier than a stack of bricks. Leonard had left an hour ago, leaving behind a silence that felt different than before. It was no longer the silence of abandonment. It was the silence of a job site before the demolition crew arrives. I stared at the black screen, seeing my own reflection. A 72-year-old man with a drooping face and a hospital gown. But behind those eyes, the gears were turning. I was about to do something I should have done years ago. I was going to inspect the foundation of my own house. I opened the smart home application. I had installed this system myself 3 years ago. It was top of the line, a hardwired network of high-definition cameras and audio sensors that covered every square inch of my estate in Lake Forest. I originally put it in to protect us from burglars, from outsiders who might want to take what I had built. I never imagined that the real thieves were sleeping down the hall. My fingers, still clumsy from the stroke, tapped the screen. I navigated to the cloud storage history. The system saves 30 days of footage. I scrolled back to Tuesday. The day of the stroke. The day my life changed. I wanted to see what was happening in my sanctuary while I was dying on the floor of a pharmacy. I selected the kitchen camera first. The timestamp read 9:30 a.m. That was exactly 1 hour before I collapsed. The video loaded with crystal clear resolution. The morning sun was streaming through the bay windows I had installed to give Patricia a view of the garden. The kitchen was a mess of open suitcases and travel clothes. Tiffany, my daughter-in-law, walked into the frame. She was wearing a silk robe that I paid for, holding a glass of white wine. At 9:30 in the morning, she was on her phone, pacing back and forth in front of the Sub-Zero refrigerator. I turned the volume up on the iPad. The audio quality was perfect. I could hear the ice clinking in her glass. She was talking to her mother. I knew that voice. She used a tone with her mother that she never used with me. With me, she was sweet, almost childish. With her mother, she was a shark. "Relax, Mom," Tiffany said, taking a sip of wine. "We are leaving in 3 hours. The old man is out running errands. He is probably at the hardware store buying more light bulbs we do not need." She paused, listening to her mother on the other end. Then she laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. "No, Mom. Listen to me," she continued. "We did not pay it. Brandon was freaking out about the premium. It was $5,000 for the quarter. I told him why bother. The old man is walking dead anyway. His blood pressure is a ticking time bomb. I told Brandon to use that money for the excursion package. We booked the private island tour instead. I felt the blood in my veins turn to ice water. My hand gripped the edge of the iPad so hard I thought the glass might crack. They did not just ignore my health. They gambled on it. They deliberately skipped my health insurance payment to buy a day on a private beach. They were betting against my survival. They were shorting my life stock. Tiffany continued leaning against the granite island. Look, if he kicks the bucket while we are gone, it is actually better. The probate process is faster if we are not here to contest anything immediately. We just come back, play the grieving family, and wait for the lawyers to cut the checks. Brandon is the sole heir. Once the old man is gone, that house, the accounts, the business, it is all ours. I can finally renovate this kitchen. I hate these cabinets. She hated the cabinets. I hand-picked that cherry wood. I sanded those cabinets myself, and she was planning to rip them out with money she hoped to get from my death. I stopped the video. I could not watch her face anymore. I felt a physical pain in my chest, but it wasn't the stroke. It was the realization that I had been sleeping next to a viper's nest. I had invited them in. I had fed them, and they were just waiting for me to stop breathing so they could consume the carcass. I needed to see more. I needed to see Patricia. I switched the camera view to the master bedroom. The timestamp was 10:15 a.m., just 15 minutes before my collapse. Patricia was in the room. She was standing in front of the walk-in closet. But she wasn't packing her clothes. She was standing in front of the hidden wall safe behind the painting. I saw her punch in the code. My birthday. Of course. I was so predictable. The heavy steel door swung open. Patricia reached inside. She ignored the stacks of cash I kept for emergencies. She ignored the property deeds. She reached for the back, pulling out a small, worn velvet box. My breath hitched. That box did not belong to her. That box belonged to Sarah, my first wife, Brandon's mother, the woman who built the business with me, who mixed concrete when we couldn't afford laborers, who died of cancer 20 years ago. Inside that box was her diamond engagement ring and the pearl necklace she wore on our wedding day. I had told Patricia explicitly that those were for Brandon's future daughter, if he ever had one. They were not to be touched. On the screen, Patricia opened the box. She held the pearls up to the light. She didn't look reverent. She looked greedy. She draped them around her neck, admiring herself in the full-length mirror. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. I watched as she spoke. "Hey, it's me," she said. "Yeah, I am bringing the jewelry." "No, he doesn't know. Look, he is getting senile. If something happens to him, he might get sentimental and donate this stuff to a museum or give it to one of those nurses he flirts with. I am just keeping it safe. Besides, I deserve it. I have put up with his boring construction stories for 15 years. This is just back pay. Back pay." She called my first wife's legacy back pay for enduring my company. She shoved the velvet box into her carry-on bag, buried deep beneath her swimsuits and sarongs. She closed the safe and adjusted the painting, wiping her fingerprints off the frame with the sleeve of her blouse. I watched her smile at herself in the mirror one last time. It was a smile of victory. She thought she had won. She thought she had outsmarted the old contractor. She thought the walls of that house couldn't talk. But she forgot that I built the walls, and I wired them to see everything. I turned off the iPad. The screen went black, swallowing the image of my wife, stealing the last physical memory of my true love. I lay back against the pillows. The hospital room was quiet, but inside my head there was a deafening clarity. For the first time in days, the fog was completely gone. I checked my pulse on the monitor. It was steady. Strong. I did not cry. I did not feel sad. Sadness is a luxury for people who have hope that things might go back to the way they were. I had no such hope. I had something better. I had a blueprint. I knew exactly what I had to do. They wanted the house. They would find it empty. They wanted the money. They would find a ledger of debts. They wanted me dead. They were going to find me more alive than I had been in 20 years. I reached for the red button on the side of the bed, the nurse call light. A moment later, Maria stuck her head in the door. She looked concerned. "Mr. Caldwell, Are you in pain? Do you need medication? I looked at her. I sat up, pushing myself off the mattress with my good arm. I swung my legs over the edge of the bed. My left foot hit the floor. It felt weak, but it held. No medication. Maria, I said. My voice was gravel, but it was loud. Then what do you need? She asked. I gripped the side rail of the bed. I focused every ounce of my will into my legs. Get the physical therapist, I commanded. Get the walker. Get the cane. I don't care what you have to bring. Maria stepped forward. Mr. Caldwell, the doctor said you need to take it slow. You just came out of a coma. I looked her in the eye. My family is coming back in 8 days, Maria. By the time they land, I need to be standing in that driveway. I need to be the one to lock the gate. I tried to stand. My knees buckled, shaking violently. Maria rushed to catch me, but I waved her off. I gritted my teeth, tasting the iron of my own determination. I forced my knees to lock. I stood, swaying, sweating, trembling, but standing. I am walking out of here, I said, staring at the empty doorframe as if it were the entrance to my own home. Bring the therapist. We start now. And Maria, yes. Mr. Caldwell. Bring me a phone charger. I have a lot of calls to make. I have a house to sell, and I want to make sure the for sale sign is the first thing they see from the limousine. Maria looked at me, really looked at me. She saw the fire in my eyes. She nodded slowly. I will get the walker, she said. I stood there alone in the room, swaying like a skyscraper in a high wind, but grounded deep in the bedrock of my rage. The camera footage played over and over in my mind. Tiffany's laugh, Patricia's greed, Brandon's absence. Enjoy the vacation, I whispered to the empty air, because when you get back, the locks will be changed, and the landlord is evicting you. The physical therapy room smelled of industrial cleaner and stale sweat, a scent that usually reminded me of a construction site at the end of a long shift. But today, it smelled like a battlefield. I was gripping the parallel bars so hard my knuckles were white, the metal biting into my palms. My left leg, the one that had been dead weight just 48 hours ago, was shaking violently. It felt like 1,000 needles were stabbing into my calf muscle. The pain was blinding, a white-hot flash that shot up my spine with every step I tried to take. Mr. Caldwell. Please, the therapist said, her voice laced with panic. You are pushing too hard. Your blood pressure is spiking. We need to stop. You are going to hurt yourself. I didn't stop. I gritted my teeth so hard I thought a molar might crack. I looked at the mirror at the end of the room. I didn't see a broken old man. I saw Patricia's face. I saw her laughing as she dabbed sweat off her yoga instructor with my anniversary gift. I saw Tiffany sipping wine in my kitchen, calculating how fast she could spend my life savings. One more step, I growled. I dragged my left foot forward. It was ugly. It was clumsy. But it moved. The doctor standing by the door adjusted his glasses, looking at my chart with disbelief. He had told me yesterday that I wouldn't be walking unassisted for 3 weeks. He didn't account for the power of pure, unadulterated hatred. Rage is a powerful fuel. It burns cleaner and hotter than hope. I wasn't doing this to walk my dog. I wasn't doing this to play golf. I was doing this so I could stand on my own 2 feet when I destroyed their levhus. I finished the length of the bars and collapsed into the wheelchair Maria had positioned behind me. My chest was heaving. Sweat dripped from my nose onto the linoleum. Get me my phone, I said, gasping for air. Maria handed it to me. She didn't argue anymore. She had seen the fire in my eyes, and she knew better than to try and put it out. I dialed Leonard first. He answered on the second ring. Harry, how are you holding up? He asked. I ignored the pleasantries. I stared at my trembling legs. I need a restraining order, Leonard. Against all of them. Patricia, Brandon, Tiffany. Leonard hesitated. Harry, a restraining order requires proof of a threat, usually physical abuse or harassment. Abandonment is terrible, but the judge might not see it as an immediate danger to your safety. I wiped the sweat from my eyes. Leonard, listen to me. If they come near me, my blood pressure will spike and I will have another stroke. That is a medical threat. Furthermore, I have footage of them conspiring to let me die to speed up the inheritance. That is conspiracy to commit harm. I want them barred from the hospital. I want them barred from the house. And I want the divorce papers filed under the grounds of adultery and extreme cruelty. I heard the scratching of Leonard's pen on paper. I can get an emergency temporary order, Leonard said slowly. I will file it ex parte so they don't need to be present. We will serve them the minute they step off the plane. Good, I said. Now hang up. I have to make a call that is going to cost me $600,000. I hung up and scrolled to a contact I hadn't called in years. Jim Miller. He was the shark of Lake Forest real estate. He was the kind of guy who would sell a haunted house to a ghostbuster if the commission was right. Jim, it's Harry Caldwell. Harry. Good to hear your voice. I heard you had a health scare. I hope you are recovering well. Cut the crap, Jim, I said. I am not calling to catch up. I am calling to sell the house on Highland Drive. There was a pause. Your house, the estate. But Harry, the market is a bit soft right now. The interest rates are up. If you want top dollar, we should wait until the spring season. We need to stage it, take professional photos, do the open house circuit. I interrupted him. I don't want top dollar, Jim. And I don't want a staging crew. I want it sold. Today. Silence on the other end. Harry, what are you talking about? That house is appraised at $2.5 million. It is a landmark in the neighborhood. List it for $1.9, I said. I could hear Jim choking on his coffee. $1.9, Harry, are you insane? That is $600,000 below market value. You are leaving $500,000 on the table. I gripped the phone tighter. I am not leaving it on the table, Jim. I am paying it as a fee for speed. I want a cash buyer, no financing contingencies, no inspection period. Closing in 48 hours. Who do you know who has that kind of liquidity? Jim was a businessman. The shock wore off instantly, replaced by the smell of a quick commission. At 1.9, I have 3 investment groups who would buy it sight unseen. It is a steal. They would tear down the interior and flip it, but they would buy it. Do it, I said. Call them. Tell them the first one to wire the deposit gets the deed. But there is one condition. What is it? The house must be empty of all occupants, and the locks must be changed by Friday noon. The new owner must take possession immediately. If my family shows up at the door on Friday afternoon, I want them to be trespassing. Jim laughed nervously. You are serious, aren't you? I have never been more serious in my life. Get the paperwork ready. I will sign it electronically from my hospital bed. I hung up the phone and leaned back in the wheelchair. My muscles were screaming in agony, but my mind was clear. Selling the house below market value wasn't a loss. It was a tactical strike. If I kept the house even with a restraining order, they would try to claim tenant rights. They would say it was their marital home. They would drag it out in court for months, living in my guest rooms while I paid the electric bill. But if the house belonged to a stranger, if the house belonged to a faceless investment corporation, then they had no rights. They were just intruders on private property. I closed my eyes and pictured the scene. The limousine pulling up. The driver unloading the heavy suitcases. Patricia walking up the stone path in her expensive heels, expecting to walk into her air-conditioned sanctuary. And instead, finding a strange keyhole. Finding a stranger opening the door. It was worth every penny of the $600,000 loss. Maria touched my shoulder. Mr. Caldwell, you are smiling. It is a scary smile. I looked at her. Maria, I said, I think I am ready for another lap on the bars. She looked at my shaking legs. Are you sure? I grabbed the handles and pulled myself up. The pain shot through me again, familiar and sharp. I am sure, I said. I have to be strong enough to sign the closing documents. As I took another step, dragging my dead leg forward, I realized that I wasn't just rehabbing my body, I was rehabbing my dignity. For years, I had been the provider, the safety net, the wallet. I had let them soften me. I had let them think I was a permanent fixture that would always be there to support their weight. Well, the fixture was moving, and the structure they built their lives on was about to collapse. I walked. 1 step. 2 steps. The sweat poured down my face. I imagined each step was a signature on a check they would never cash. I imagined each step was a lock clicking shut. The doctor watched me from the doorway, shaking his head. He had seen stroke victims fight to get back to their old lives. He had never seen one fight to burn his old life to the ground so he could build a new one from the ashes. But I was a builder. That is what we do. We clear the site, we dig the foundation, and we start over. I finished the session and sat back down, exhausted but triumphant. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Jim. I have an offer, all cash, 1.9 million. They can close Thursday. I typed back with a single finger. Sold. The word looked beautiful on the screen. It was the most expensive text message I had ever sent, and it was the best money I had ever spent. I looked out the window at the parking lot. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the asphalt. In 5 days, my family would return from paradise. They would be tanned. They would be relaxed. They would be expecting a homecoming. Instead, they were going to find out that while they were at sea, the land had moved beneath their feet. I turned to Maria. Get me a protein shake, I said, and call Leonard back. I want to make sure the proceeds from the house sale go into a trust they cannot touch. You are a machine, Maria whispered. No, I said, staring at my reflection in the dark window. I am just a father who finally learned the difference between a family and a parasite. And the extermination was just beginning. The ride from the hospital to Lake Forest took 40 minutes, and every bump in the road felt like a hammer striking my spine. I had signed myself out against medical advice, signing a waiver that essentially said if I dropped dead on the pavement, the hospital was not liable. I did not care. I had business to finish that was more important than my blood pressure. When the Uber pulled up to the wrought iron gates of my estate, I felt a strange sensation. For 30 years, this view had filled me with pride. The long driveway lined with oak trees, the brick facade, the manicured lawn. Today it looked different. It did not look like a home. It looked like an asset on a balance sheet that needed to be liquidated. It looked like a crime scene where my heart had been murdered. I limped up the front steps, leaning heavily on the cane Maria had forced me to take. Jim Miller was already there, pacing on the porch. Beside him stood 2 men in shiny suits who looked like they would sell their own mothers for a 10% return. These were the flippers, the sharks, the kind of men who bought distressed properties, slapped a coat of gray paint on everything, and sold it for a profit. Usually I despised their kind. Today they were my angels of destruction. Jim introduced them, but I did not bother to remember their names. One of them, a tall man with gelled hair, looked at me with suspicion. Mr. Caldwell, he said, eyeing my hospital bracelet, which I had forgotten to cut off. We have reviewed the comps in the neighborhood. This house is listed at 2.5 million. You are offering it to us for 1.9. That is a 30% discount. What is wrong with it? Is there black mold? Is the foundation cracking? I unlocked the front door and pushed it open. The air inside was stale, smelling of the expensive perfume Patricia sprayed everywhere and the underlying scent of deceit. The foundation is solid, I said, walking into the foyer. The roof is slate and has a 50-year warranty. The HVAC system is new. The only thing rotting in this house is the memory of the people who lived here. The investors exchanged a look. They thought I was crazy. They thought I was a desperate old man losing his mind. Good. Desperation makes people move fast, and I needed speed. I led them into the kitchen. The granite countertops gleamed. The stainless steel appliances shone. This was the kitchen Tiffany wanted to renovate because she hated the color of the wood. Here's the deal, I said, leaning against the island to take the weight off my bad leg. You get the house for $1.9 million, as is. You get the furniture. You get the appliances. You get the curtains. But there are 3 conditions. The short investor pulled out a tablet. Name them, he said. Condition 1, I said. We close today. The wire transfer hits my account within the hour. Condition 2. You do not ask me any questions about why I am selling. Condition 3. And this is non-negotiable. You must have a locksmith here at noon on Friday. You must change every lock on the perimeter. You must change the gate code. And you must have a security guard posted at the entrance for the first 48 hours. The tall investor laughed nervously. A security guard? Who are we keeping out? The previous tenants, I said coldly. My family. They return from vacation on Friday afternoon. When they arrive, I want them to realize they do not live here anymore. I want them to realize they are trespassing. The investors went silent. They looked around the opulent kitchen, doing the math in their heads. They were getting a $600,000 profit margin just for changing some locks and dealing with a little family drama. Greed, as I knew it, would win the argument. We can do that, the tall man said. We can have the wire sent now. Do it, I said. I will sign the papers electronically. Now get out. I want 1 hour alone in this house before it belongs to you. They left to make their calls, leaving me alone in the silent cavern of my life. I had 60 minutes to say goodbye. I had 60 minutes to purge the last 20 years. I grabbed a black heavy-duty trash bag from the pantry. I walked into the living room. The mantel was lined with framed photographs. It was a shrine to a happiness that had never really existed. I picked up the first frame. It was a wedding photo. Patricia and I standing on a beach in Maui. She looked beautiful. I looked besotted. I remembered that day. I remembered giving her a diamond bracelet that cost more than my first car. I looked at her smile in the photo. It didn't reach her eyes. It was the same smile she wore in the video on the plane, the smile of a cat that had just swallowed a canary. I didn't pack the photo. I didn't take it out of the frame. I smashed it against the brick of the fireplace. The glass shattered with a satisfying crunch. I threw the broken shards and the twisted frame into the trash bag. I moved down the line. A photo of Brandon at his college graduation. I had paid his tuition in full. I had bought him a new BMW as a graduation gift. In the photo, he had his arm around me, but his body was turned away, looking at his friends, looking for the next party. He never thanked me for the car. He just asked if I could pay for the insurance, too. I threw it in the bag. I walked down the hallway to the master bedroom. I opened the closet. Patricia's clothes were everywhere. Designer dresses she wore once. Shoes that cost $1,000 a pair. I didn't touch them. The investors could have them. They could sell them at a consignment shop. I opened the drawer of my nightstand. This was where I kept the things that actually mattered. My passport, my original contractor license, and a small leather box. I opened the box. Inside was a vintage Rolex Submariner. It was from 1980. It was scratched. It was worn. It was the watch I bought when I landed my first $1 million contract. I had kept it polished. I had kept it safe. I had planned to give it to my grandson. Tiffany was pregnant 3 years ago. We had a gender reveal party. It was a boy. I was so happy. I thought finally a legacy. Someone to carry the name. Someone to teach the trade. But then came the miscarriage. Or so they told me. Later, I found a receipt from a clinic in the city. It wasn't a miscarriage. It was a choice. They didn't want a child. They wanted to travel. They wanted freedom. They lied to me because they knew a grieving grandfather writes bigger checks than a disappointed father. But recently, Tiffany had been talking about trying again. She had been hinting that if they had a baby, they would need a bigger allowance. They would need a nanny. I held the watch. The heavy steel felt cold in my hand. I thought about the imaginary grandson I had been saving this for. I thought about Brandon. If I left this watch, Brandon would find it. He would sell it. He wouldn't care about the history. He wouldn't care that I wore this watch while pouring the concrete for the city hospital. He would pawn it for a weekend in Vegas. Then I heard Tiffany's voice in my head echoing from the surveillance video. Lame old man. Senile. Useless. I am not senile, I whispered to the empty room. I dropped the watch into my pocket. I wasn't going to leave it. But I wasn't going to keep it either. I knew a charity in Chicago that auctioned off luxury items to pay for trade school scholarships for inner-city kids. Kids who wanted to work. Kids who wanted to build something. One of them would wear this watch. One of them would deserve it. I swept the rest of the drawer into the trash bag. Old birthday cards from Patricia signed by her assistant. Father's Day cards from Brandon that were clearly bought at a gas station 5 minutes before dinner. Trash. All of it trash. I walked to the guest room where Brandon and Tiffany had been staying while their house was being painted. A renovation I was paying for. The room was messy. There were empty wine bottles on the dresser. On the floor by the bed was a piece of paper. I bent down, groaning as my leg protested. I picked it up. It was a brochure for a nursing home. Shady Pines Assisted Living. I looked at the prices circled. It was the budget package. Semi-private room, no private bathroom. This was their plan. This was what they were going to do with me when I got too old or too sick to write checks. They were shopping for my prison while sleeping under my roof. I crumpled the brochure and threw it in the bag. The rage that had fueled my walk earlier flared up again, hot and purifying. I was not a victim. I was a disaster they never saw coming. I walked back to the kitchen. The investors were waiting. The tall one held up his phone. The wire has been sent, Mr. Caldwell. You should see it in your account. My phone buzzed. I checked the banking app. $1.9 million. Cleared. Available. I looked at the house one last time. It was beautiful. It was majestic. And it was no longer mine. I felt a sudden lightness in my chest. The anchor was cut. Here are the keys, I said, dropping the heavy brass ring onto the granite counter. The garage clickers are there too. The alarm code is 1234. Change it immediately. I turned to leave. Mr. Caldwell, the investor called out. What about the stuff in the trash bags? Do you want to take that? I looked at the black bag in my hand filled with the shattered glass of my wedding photo and the lies of my son. No, I said. Throw it in the dumpster. It is just garbage. I walked out the front door and down the steps. The sun was high in the sky. The air was crisp. I didn't look back. I got into the waiting Uber and told the driver to take me to the bank. I had a check to write to a scholarship fund, and then I had a lawyer to meet. As the car pulled away, I imagined Friday. I imagined the locksmith drilling out the core of the deadbolt. I imagined the security guard crossing his arms. I imagined Patricia's face. For the first time since the stroke, I didn't feel pain. I felt peace. The deal was done. The shadow had passed. Now I just had to wait for the fireworks. The sound of packing tape ripping off the roll is distinct. It sounds like a zipper closing on a body bag. That was the only sound echoing through the halls of my estate on Wednesday morning. I had hired a team of 12 movers, the best in Chicago. I told them I was moving out. I did not tell them I was evicting my entire family while they were sipping Mai Tais in the Caribbean. I stood in the center of the foyer, leaning on my cane, directing the operation, like a general on a battlefield. I had a simple system: blue stickers for my things, red stickers for theirs. My belongings were going to the Peninsula Hotel downtown. I had booked the corner suite for the next 3 months. It had a view of the lake, 24-hour room service, and most importantly, no memories of ungrateful children. My clothes, my books, my few personal mementos that I had not smashed were handled with white gloves and placed into wardrobe boxes lined with silk. The red sticker items, however, were getting a very different treatment. I pointed to the pile of Patricia's Louis Vuitton luggage, the ones she didn't take on the trip. I pointed to Tiffany's collection of designer shoes, which she displayed on shelves like trophies. I pointed to Brandon's 80-inch television and his limited edition gaming consoles. Pack them, I ordered the foreman, a burly man named Mike. But do not use the premium boxes. Use the standard cardboard. And do not bother with the bubble wrap for the clothes. Just stuff them in. Mike looked at me confused. Sir, these are expensive items. Are you sure? I looked him in the eye. I am paying you by the hour, Mike. Just get it out of my house. The destination for the red sticker items was not the Peninsula Hotel. It was a facility called Budget Self-Storage on the far south side of the city. I had chosen it specifically for its 1-star rating on Google. It was located in an industrial park known for flooding. The units were not climate-controlled. In Chicago, where the summers are humid and the winters are brutal, a non-climate-controlled unit is a death sentence for leather and electronics. I imagined Patricia's fur coats sitting in that metal box next August, slowly growing mold in the stagnant heat. I imagined the humidity warping the circuit boards of Brandon's electronics. It was petty, I admit it. But after they left me to die on a pharmacy floor, petty felt like justice. I signed the contract for the storage unit electronically that morning. I selected the month-to-month plan. I paid exactly $50 for the first month's rent. I did not put a credit card on file for autopay. I listed Brandon's email address as the contact for billing, knowing full well he never checked his spam folder where the invoices would inevitably go. The terms of the storage facility were clear. If payment is not received within 30 days, the lock is cut and the contents are auctioned off to the highest bidder. I was giving them a 30-day window to salvage their lives. If they could scrape together $50 after I cut them off, they could keep their things. If not, well, I hear vintage handbags sell well at auctions. As the movers worked stripping the rooms bare, I walked through the house one last time. It was starting to look like a skeleton. The rugs were rolled up. The paintings were down, leaving pale rectangular ghosts on the walls where the sun hadn't hit the paint for years. I went into the master bedroom. 2 movers were dismantling the California king bed. I told them to take the mattress to the dump. I didn't want anyone sleeping on the lies that had been whispered in that bed. While they were pulling up the rug in the walk-in closet, one of the movers called out to me. "Mr. Caldwell, you might want to see this." I walked over. The mover was pointing to a loose floorboard in the back corner of the closet, hidden under where Patricia kept her shoe rack. The wood was pried up slightly. I used the tip of my cane to lift the board. Underneath, nestled in the insulation, was a metal cash box. It was an old lockbox, the kind you buy at an office supply store for $20. It wasn't locked. I opened it. Inside were stacks of cash. Hundreds, 50s, 20s. I started counting. It took me 10 minutes. $20,000. I stared at the money. This wasn't drug money. This wasn't lottery winnings. This was skimming. For 10 years, I had given Patricia a generous allowance for household expenses. Grocery money, dry cleaning money, decorating money. She had been padding the bills. She had been buying generic brands and charging me for premium. She had been firing the cleaning ladies early and pocketing the difference. She had been stealing from me dollar by dollar, day by day, right under my nose. $20,000. That was a lot of coupons clipped. That was a lot of corners cut. She was hoarding a getaway fund, or maybe just a slush fund for her yoga instructor. I felt a laugh bubble up in my chest. It was a dry, raspy sound. She thought she was so clever. She thought she had a safety net hidden under the floorboards. I looked at Mike, the foreman. "Finders keepers?" Mike asked jokingly. I shook my head. "No, this is a refund." I took the rubber-banded stacks and shoved them into the pockets of my jacket. They bulged heavy and satisfying. "Consider this the cleaning fee," I whispered. I walked out of the bedroom and didn't look back. By 2 o'clock, the house was empty. The echo was profound. My footsteps clicked loudly on the hardwood floors. The movers had swept up the dust bunnies. The walls were bare. The windows were curtainless, letting in the harsh afternoon light that revealed every scratch and imperfection in the floor that had been hidden by furniture. It looked like a house that was waiting to be born, or a house that had just died. I stood in the kitchen. This was the heart of the home. This was where I had cooked Sunday dinners, hoping they would show up on time. This was where I had sat alone eating leftovers when they didn't. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a single plain white envelope. Inside was a single key, the key to the storage unit on the south side. There was no note, no letter of explanation, no angry rant. I had realized that explaining myself to them was a waste of breath. They knew what they did, and if they didn't, no amount of words would make them understand. I placed the envelope in the exact center of the kitchen island. It was the only object in the entire 4,000-square-foot house. It looked stark. It looked final. I imagined them walking in. I imagined the confusion, the panic, running from room to room, finding nothing but air. And then finally coming to the kitchen, finding the envelope, finding the key, and the slow, dawning horror of realizing that their luxury life had been packed up and shipped to a tin can in the ghetto. I turned off the lights. The house plunged into semi-darkness. I walked to the front door. Mike was waiting with the clipboard for me to sign off on the job. "Everything is loaded, Mr. Caldwell," Mike said. "Your truck is heading to the hotel. The other 2 trucks are heading to storage. We will send you the bill." I reached into my pocket and pulled out $500 from Patricia's stash. I handed it to him. "Buy the guys lunch," I said. "And Mike." "Yes, sir. If anyone asks, you never saw me. You just picked up a job from a property management company." Mike winked. He understood. He had seen enough divorces and family feuds to know when to keep his mouth shut. I stepped out onto the porch. The air outside tasted sweet. It tasted like freedom. I locked the front door with the old key, the one that would be useless in 48 hours when the new owners changed the locks. I dropped the key under the doormat. A classic place. A place they would look, but it wouldn't matter. By the time they tried to use it, this wouldn't be their house anymore. I walked down the steps to the waiting Uber. I didn't look back at the window where I used to watch for their cars. I didn't look at the garden I had planted for Patricia. I got into the car. The driver looked in the rearview mirror. "Where to, sir?" he asked. "The Peninsula Hotel," I said, "and then take the scenic route along the lake. I want to see the water." As the car pulled away, I patted the pocket where Patricia's $20,000 sat warm against my hip. I was going to use that money to buy the most expensive bottle of scotch the hotel bar had. And I was going to toast to the empty house. The purge was complete. The cancer was cut out. Now all that was left was to wait for the patient to wake up and realize a vital part of them was missing. And the best part. The surgery was completely legal. Friday afternoon arrived with the kind of gray, biting wind that makes Chicago feel like the coldest place on earth, a stark contrast to the tropical paradise my family had just left. I was sitting in my suite at the Peninsula Hotel, watching the rain streak against the glass, but my mind was at O'Hare International Airport. I had the flight tracker open on my iPad. Emirates Flight 293 from Dubai, connecting from their Caribbean excursion, touched down at exactly 1:15 in the afternoon. I imagined the scene perfectly, because I had paid for those scenes for decades. I knew exactly how they looked. They would be walking through the terminal with that specific swagger of people who have spent 10 days being waited on hand and foot. Patricia would be wearing her oversized sunglasses indoors, hiding the fact that she was 62, pushing a cart stacked high with duty-free bags. Brandon would be walking 5 steps behind her, scrolling through his phone, probably posting a final vacation photo. I checked Instagram. Sure enough, there it was. A picture of the 3 of them, holding cocktails with little umbrellas captioned, "Back to reality." Sad face emoji. I took a sip of my scotch and whispered to the empty room. You have no idea how sad that reality is about to get. They did not take a taxi. They never took taxis. My notifications showed a charge attempt for an Uber black SUV. It went through because I had left one specific credit card active with a $500 limit, just enough to get them to the house. I wanted them to get to the door. I wanted them to have the full experience of arrival before the rug was pulled out. The ride took an hour. I traced the little black car icon on the map as it moved down the highway, exiting toward the wealthy enclave of Lake Forest. It was like watching a funeral procession. Only the deceased were sitting in the back seat, completely unaware that their lives had ended days ago. The car pulled up to the estate at 2:30. I visualized the driver getting out, unloading the heavy Louis Vuitton trunks, the golf clubs Brandon insisted on bringing, but never used, and the bags of souvenirs. They would be shivering slightly in their linen clothes, the Chicago chill biting through their tans. Patricia would be the first to the door. She always was. She liked to be the one to open the castle gates. I could see her reaching into her designer purse, digging past the stolen jewelry and the stash of cash she didn't know I had found, searching for her keys. She would march up the stone steps, her heels clicking on the pavement, feeling the satisfaction of returning to her domain. She would slide the key into the heavy brass lock, but it wouldn't turn. She would jiggle it. She would pull it out and try again, thinking maybe she was just tired or the cold had made the mechanism stiff. But physics is honest even when people are not. The key did not fit because the cylinder was sitting in a dumpster 5 miles away. I imagined the frown forming on her forehead, the deepening lines that Botox couldn't hide. She would huff, impatient and annoyed. She would turn to Brandon and say, "The lock is jammed. Give me the code." They would move to the keypad on the garage, the one I had installed for the cleaning crew and for times when they forgot their keys, which was often. Brandon would punch in the code. 1980. His birth year. The light on the pad should have turned green. Instead, it would blink a harsh, unforgiving red. Beep, beep, beep. Invalid entry. He would try again. Maybe he hit a wrong number. Maybe his fingers were cold. 19890. Beep, beep, beep. By now the confusion would be turning into irritation. Tiffany would be shivering by the luggage, complaining about the wind telling them to hurry up because she needed to use the bathroom. Brandon would be kicking the door, shouting, "Open up, you stupid thing." They would assume it was a technical glitch, a dead battery, a system error. They never assumed it was a deliberate act because in their minds they were untouchable. They were the Caldwells. The world bent to their will because I paid for the bending. Then the front door would open. They would expect to see me, or maybe the maid. They would expect to be greeted with warmth or at least servitude. Instead, they were greeted by a man named Rocco. I didn't know Rocco personally, but the investment group had assured me their security guard was not the welcoming type. Rocco was 6'4", built like a vending machine, and he was holding the leash of a pit bull that looked like it ate luxury handbags for breakfast. I can hear the conversation in my head as if I were standing right there. Patricia would gasp, stepping back, clutching her pearls. "Who are you?" she would demand, her voice shrill. "What are you doing in my house? Where is Harry?" Rocco would not smile. He would not explain. He would simply point a thick finger at the driveway. "You need to get off this property, ma'am. This is a private residence." Patricia would laugh, a nervous, incredulous sound. "Private residence. Yes, it is my residence. I am Patricia Caldwell. My husband owns this house. Now get out of my way before I call the police." Rocco would step forward, the dog growling low in its throat. "Mr. Caldwell doesn't own this house anymore," he would say. "The property was sold 2 days ago. The new owners have taken possession. You are trespassing. I'm going to count to 3 and then I am calling 911. Sold. The word would hang in the air like a gunshot. "Sold," Brandon would stammer. "That is impossible. My dad is in the hospital. He had a stroke. He can't sell a house. He is probably in a coma." "He is not in a coma," Rocco would say, closing the door halfway. "He was here yesterday. He gave us the keys. Now move." 1, 2. The door would slam shut. The sound of the deadbolt sliding home would be the loudest noise in the neighborhood. They were left standing on the porch, surrounded by their expensive luggage, with the wind whipping their hair into their faces. The reality would start to sink in, cold and heavy. The Uber driver, having been paid, would be long gone. They were stranded. Then came the panic. I checked my phone. It started at 2:45. Patricia called. I let it ring. Then she called again. Then Brandon called. Then Tiffany. My phone buzzed and danced on the table, a frantic little jig of desperation. I watched it with a detached curiosity. I wondered what they were saying to my voicemail. Were they angry? Were they crying? Were they begging? When they realized I wasn't answering, they did exactly what I knew they would do. They called Leonard. I had instructed Leonard's secretary, a woman named Mrs. Perkins, who had the warmth of an iceberg, on exactly what to say. Patricia would be screaming into the phone, demanding answers, threatening to sue everyone from the security guard to the lock manufacturer. Mrs. Perkins would wait for her to take a breath and then speak in her calm, professional monotone. "Mrs. Caldwell, please lower your voice. Mr. Vance is in court and cannot be disturbed. However, Mr. Caldwell has left instructions." "Instructions?" Patricia would screech. "What instructions? Why is my key not working? Why is there a thug in my house? Mr. Caldwell has requested a family meeting," Mrs. Perkins would say. "He is waiting for you at St. Luke's Hospital, room 502. He suggests you come immediately. It concerns the future of the estate." She wouldn't say anything else. She would hang up. The future of the estate. Those words would act like a defibrillator to their greed. They would look at each other. They would think, "Oh God, he is dying. He sold the house because he is dying and liquidating assets. We need to get there. We need to get to the will. We need to make sure he signs the papers." The fear would turn into a different kind of panic. The panic of vultures realizing the carcass might be moving. They would grab their bags. They couldn't leave them on the porch. They had to drag them down the driveway to the street. Tiffany would be cursing. Brandon would be sweating. Patricia would be trying to fix her hair in the reflection of a car window. They needed a ride to the hospital. It was 20 miles away. Brandon would pull out his phone again. He would open the Uber app. He would select a ride. He would hit confirm. And then the final domino would fall. Processing payment. Declined. He would frown. He would try another card. The visa ending in 4009. Processing. Declined. Please contact your bank. He would try the American Express. The one they used to buy the wine package. The one they used to upgrade their flight. Declined. Card reported lost or stolen. I could see the color draining from his face. He would look at Patricia. "Mom, my cards aren't working. Try yours." Patricia would pull out her gold card, the one she used for her charity lunches. She would type it into the app. Declined. Insufficient funds. I had frozen everything. The moment the house sale closed, Leonard had executed the asset freeze. The joint accounts were locked. The credit cards were canceled. The supplementary cards were destroyed digitally. They were standing on a street corner in Lake Forest, one of the richest neighborhoods in America, with $10,000 worth of clothes on their backs, and they couldn't afford a $20 ride to the hospital. They were destitute. They just didn't know it was permanent yet. I took another sip of scotch. The burn was pleasant. I imagined them arguing. I imagined Patricia screaming at Brandon to fix it. I imagined Tiffany crying that her feet hurt. Finally, they would have to do something they had never done. They would have to flag down a regular taxi, an old yellow dirty taxi, and they would have to get in hoping that maybe, just maybe, one of the cards would work when they got to the destination, or that they could talk their way out of the fare. They were coming to me. They were coming to the trap I had set. And they were coming hungry, tired, and broke. I set my glass down. It was time to go. I called the concierge. "Bring my car around," I said. "I have a meeting at the hospital." The stage was set. The actors were arriving. And I had the only script. The stage was set, and I was ready for the performance of a lifetime. I sat in a heavy medical wheelchair positioned precisely in the center of the VIP suite at St. Luke's Hospital. I had a woolen blanket draped over my legs, hiding the fact that my muscles were twitching with the urge to stand up and kick them out. I let my head loll slightly to the left, mimicking the weakness of the stroke I had suffered just days ago. My hands rested in my lap, deliberately trembling. To anyone walking through that door, I looked like a broken man, a confused geriatric patient who had lost his grip on reality. Leonard stood in the corner, leaning against the wall with his arms crossed. He looked like a stone gargoyle in a three-piece suit. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. We just waited. The room was quiet save for the hum of the heater battling the Chicago chill outside. Then we heard them. It wasn't a knock. It was a commotion. I heard the distinct click of high heels on the linoleum floor of the hallway moving fast. I heard Patricia's voice shrill and demanding, arguing with a nurse about visitation hours. I heard Brandon mumbling something about a lawsuit. I heard Tiffany complaining about the smell of the hospital. The door burst open. They looked like drowned rats in designer linen. The rain had ruined Patricia's blowout. Her mascara was slightly smudged. Brandon was shivering in a thin tropical shirt, his arms wrapped around himself, looking miserable and confused. Tiffany was limping, presumably from dragging luggage in heels. They brought the cold air in with them, along with the scent of desperation and damp wool. Patricia saw me first. Her eyes widened. For a split second, I saw the calculation. She was assessing the damage. She was looking at the wheelchair, the drool I had artfully allowed to gather at the corner of my mouth, the blanket. She wasn't looking at a husband. She was looking at a liability. Then the mask slipped into place. "Oh my God!" "Harry," she shrieked, rushing forward. She threw her arms around me, burying her face in my shoulder. She smelled of duty-free perfume and panic. I forced myself not to recoil. I forced my body to remain limp, unresponsive. "Harry, we have been so worried," she sobbed, pulling back to look at me, her hands gripping my shoulders a little too hard. "Why didn't you answer the phone? We have been calling for hours. It has been a nightmare." The driver dropped us off at the house, and there was a man there with a dog. A horrible man. He wouldn't let us in. He said you sold the house. She laughed, then a high-pitched, hysterical sound. "Can you believe that? He said you sold our home." I told him he was insane. I told him my husband is Harry Caldwell, and he would never do such a thing without telling me. I just stared at her. I blinked slowly, letting my gaze drift past her to Brandon. My son was standing by the door, holding his useless credit card in his hand, like a talisman. He looked terrified. Not for me, but for his lifestyle. Dad, Brandon said, his voice cracking. Dad, you gotta fix this. The cards are all declined, even the black card. We had to take a dirty yellow cab here. The driver yelled at us because we didn't have cash. Mom had to give him her earrings. Patricia shook me again. Harry, speak to me. Tell us what is going on. Who is that man at the house? Why are the locks changed? You need to call the police right now and tell them to arrest him. I let out a low, moaning sound. I pointed a shaking finger at Leonard. Leonard stepped forward from the shadows. His voice was calm, deep, and devoid of any sympathy. Mrs. Caldwell, please step back. Harry is very frail. The excitement is not good for his heart. Patricia spun around, her eyes flashing. Leonard, thank God. You need to fix this mess. Someone has stolen Harry's identity. Someone sold the house out from under us while we were on vacation. And the bank accounts are frozen. You need to call the bank. You need to call the police. Tiffany, who had been quiet until now, stepped forward. She walked right up to the wheelchair, pushing Patricia aside. She looked at me with cold, hard eyes. There were no tears in her eyes, only rage. He didn't get his identity stolen, Patricia, she spat. Look at him. Look at his face. He is gone. The lights are on, but nobody is home. She leaned down, her face inches from mine. I could smell the white wine she had probably chugged on the plane. You signed something, didn't you, old man? She hissed. Some scam artist got to you. Some realtor saw a brain-damaged old man and tricked you into signing the deed. That is what happened, isn't it? You gave away our house for pennies because you didn't know what day it was. Tiffany. Patricia gasped. Don't talk to him like that. Shut up, Mom, Tiffany yelled, spinning on her heel. Don't you see what is happening? He has lost his mind. He has dementia or brain damage from the stroke. He sold the house. He froze the accounts. He is destroying everything because he is incompetent. She turned back to me, pointing a manicured finger in my face. You are insane, she screamed. You have no right to do this. That house was Brandon's inheritance. That money is ours. You are just the custodian, and you failed. She looked at Leonard. Leonard, you are a witness. He is clearly incapacitated. We are filing for emergency guardianship tomorrow morning. We are going to have him declared mentally unfit. We will annul the sale of the house. We will take control of the estate. And we are going to put him in a facility where he can't do any more damage. Patricia looked at me, then at the comfort of the expensive room, then back at Tiffany. The realization hit her. If I was incompetent, she would get control. She wouldn't have to beg for money anymore. She wouldn't have to hide cash under the floorboards. Yes, she whispered, her voice trembling with feigned sorrow. Yes, Tiffany is right. Oh, my poor Harry. You really have lost it, haven't you? It is for your own good. We can't let you make these decisions. You are sick. You need help. She reached out to pat my hand, her touch patronizing and cold. Don't worry, sweetie. We will take care of everything. We will get the lawyers to fix the house. We will find you a nice home. Shady Pines has good reviews, I hear. Brandon nodded eagerly. Yeah, Dad. It is for the best. You clearly don't know what you are doing. I mean, selling the house, leaving us stranded. That is crazy talk. We will handle the business from now on. I sat there listening to every word. I let them paint their masterpiece of greed. I let them say it out loud. They didn't ask if I was in pain. They didn't ask if I was scared. They jumped straight to declaring me insane so they could reverse the sale and claw back their inheritance. They were willing to lock me away in a nursing home, strip me of my rights, and take everything I had built just so they didn't have to get jobs. It was perfect. It was exactly what I needed. They had just admitted in front of a witness that their only interest was the money. I looked at Leonard. He was staring at them with a look of pure disgust. He nodded once, a barely perceptible dip of his chin. It was time. I stopped shaking. I took a deep breath, filling my lungs with the sterile hospital air. I straightened my spine. I lifted my head. The drool I had faked was wiped away with a crisp movement of my hand. The weakness in my eyes vanished, replaced by the steel gaze that had stared down union bosses and mafia concrete suppliers in the 80s. I gripped the arms of the wheelchair. I didn't need the cane. The rage was enough. I pushed myself up. Patricia gasped. She took a step back, her hand flying to her mouth. Tiffany froze, her mouth hanging open. Brandon dropped his credit card. It hit the floor with a tiny plastic clatter that sounded like a thunderclap in the silent room. I stood to my full height. 6'2". My leg hurt, yes, but I didn't sway. I stood like a tower. I looked down at them. My family. My parasites. I am not crazy, Patricia, I said. My voice was low, steady, and booming. It didn't sound like a stroke victim. It sounded like the man who paid for the clothes on their backs. And I am not incompetent, Tiffany, I continued, turning my gaze to her. I knew exactly what I was signing. I read every clause. I initialed every page. I took a step toward them. They shrank back, huddled together like sheep facing a wolf. I sold the house because I didn't want you in it, I said. I froze the accounts because I didn't want you spending another dime of my money. And as for guardianship, I laughed. It was a cold, dark sound. You can try. But Leonard here has a recording of the last 5 minutes. He has a recording of you conspiring to put me away. He has a recording of you admitting you only care about the inheritance. Any judge who hears that will laugh you out of court. Patricia stammered, her face pale. Harry, wait. We were just emotional. We were scared. We love you. I love you. I mimicked my voice, dripping with venom. Is that why you left me on the floor of a pharmacy? Is that why you went on a cruise while I was in surgery? Is that why you stole my first wife's jewelry? Patricia's eyes bulged. She clutched her purse where the pearls were likely still hidden. I know everything I said. I saw the cameras. I saw the bank attempts. I found the cash under the floorboards. I reached into the pocket of my robe and pulled out a stack of photos. The screenshots from the security cameras. Patricia stealing the pearls. Tiffany drinking wine. Brandon at the bank. I threw them in the air. They fluttered down like confetti at a funeral. The show is over, I said. And so is the free ride. I looked at Leonard. Show them the door, Leonard, and give them the papers. Leonard stepped forward, pulling a thick envelope from his jacket pocket. He held it out to Brandon. You have been served, Leonard said. Divorce papers for your mother, eviction notices, and a restraining order. If you come within 500 feet of Mr. Caldwell or his property, you will be arrested. I sat back down in the wheelchair, not because I was weak, but because I was done with them. I turned my chair toward the window, presenting my back to them. Get out, I said. Harry, please, Patricia wailed. I said, get out. I roared, a sound that shook the walls. I heard the door open. I heard Leonard's low voice guiding them out. I heard Patricia sobbing, real tears, this time tears of a woman who realizes she has lost the golden goose. When the door clicked shut, the silence returned. But it wasn't lonely. It was victorious. I looked at my reflection in the window. I looked tired. I looked old. But for the first time in years, I looked like a man who owned his own life. Now I whispered, let the real healing begin. The silence in the room was absolute, a vacuum created by the sheer force of my rejection. But Leonard was not done. He stepped away from the door, moving with the slow, deliberate grux of a man who knows he is holding all the aces. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small black remote control. He pointed it at the 60-inch television mounted on the wall opposite the bed. I watched their faces. They were confused. They were expecting a shouting match, an emotional breakdown, or perhaps a negotiation. They were not expecting a movie night. Leonard pressed the button. The screen flared to life. The audio was turned up to the maximum volume. The first image was static, a digital timestamp from 4 days ago. Then the audio kicked in. It was the recording of the 911 call from the pharmacy. The quality was crystal clear. My wife's voice filled the room, amplified and distorted by the speakers stripping away any pretense of love or concern. "We cannot deal with this right now. The limousine is 20 minutes away. That trip cost $15,000 and it is non-refundable." Patricia flinched as if she had been slapped. She looked at the screen, her eyes wide with horror, not because of what she had said, but because she was hearing it played back in front of witnesses. She was hearing the naked sound of her own selfishness. The screen changed. It was the security footage from the kitchen, Tiffany sipping her wine. The timestamp showed it was while I was in the ambulance. If he kicks the bucket while we are gone, it is actually better. The probate process is faster. Tiffany gasped, her hand flying to her throat. She looked at Brandon, but he was staring at the screen, paralyzed. Then the final clip, the one Leonard had received just this morning from the private investigator. It was footage from the cruise ship deck. Patricia wearing my anniversary scarf, laughing, as the yoga instructor whispered something in her ear. She was holding a drink, looking at the ocean, looking completely and utterly unburdened by the thought of her dying husband. Leonard turned off the TV. The screen went black, leaving only the reflection of 3 terrified people. I stood there leaning slightly on the arm of the wheelchair, not for support, but for dominance. I looked at them. I looked at the people I had clothed, fed, and housed for decades. "You made a calculation," I said, my voice cutting through the thick air of the room. "You did the math. You weighed my life against a buffet and a tan. You gambled that I would die or that I would be so brain damaged I would never know the difference." I took a step forward. "You bet wrong." Patricia tried to speak. Her lips moved, but no sound came out. She looked like a fish on a dock, gasping for air. "You chose a cruise," I said, delivering the words like a verdict. "I chose a new life." Patricia finally found her voice. It was a weak, trembling thing. "Harry, please. That video, it is out of context. We were in shock. We were grieving in our own way. You can't throw away 30 years of marriage because of a misunderstanding. I am your wife. I am entitled to half of everything. The law says so." I laughed. It wasn't a happy laugh. It was the sound of a trap snapping shut. "The law," I repeated. "I am glad you brought up the law, Patricia, because you seem to have forgotten the document you signed 15 years ago, the day before our wedding." I nodded to Leonard. He pulled a document from the envelope. The prenuptial agreement, Leonard said, his voice dry and professional. Specifically, Article 4, Section C, the infidelity clause. Patricia's face went gray. She remembered. I saw the memory hit her like a physical blow. She had signed it because she thought I would never catch her. She thought she was too smart. The clause states that in the event of proven adultery, the spouse forfeits all claims to marital assets, alimony, and support. Leonard continued, "And thanks to the photos of you and your yoga instructor sharing a cabin which we have subpoenaed from the cruise line, the adultery is not just proven. It is documented in high definition." I threw the photos of her and the instructor onto the bed. "You leave with what you came with, Patricia," I said, which, if I remember correctly, was a used Honda Civic and a maxed-out credit card. "You get nothing. No alimony, no house, no pension." Patricia's knees buckled. It was a theatrical feint, the kind she used to pull at parties to get attention. She slumped to the floor, her designer dress pooling around her. But nobody moved to help her. I didn't move. Brandon didn't move. Even Tiffany just stared at her mother-in-law with disdain. Brandon stepped forward, his hands shaking. "Dad." "Okay, Mom messed up. She is terrible. I get it. Kick her out. But I am your son. You can't cut me off. I didn't cheat on you. I just went on a trip." He looked at me with those puppy dog eyes that used to work when he was 12. "I need help, Dad. I have debts. The restaurant—" the restaurant," I interrupted. "The bistro on Main. The one you begged me to invest in 3 years ago." I nodded to Leonard again. Another document appeared. "You told me it was a gift," Brandon stammered. "I never said it was a gift," I corrected him. "I said I would back you. And we signed a promissory note, a loan, $400,000, payable in full upon demand if the business failed or if you defaulted on the interest payments." I pointed to the paper in Leonard's hand. "You haven't paid a cent in interest in 2 years. I let it slide because I was being a father. But today I am being a banker, and the bank is calling in the loan." Brandon's face crumpled. "But I don't have $400,000. I don't have anything." "Then you will declare bankruptcy," I said coldly. "You will lose your car. You will lose your credit score. You will learn what it feels like to start from zero, just like I did. Maybe it will make a man out of you." Tiffany let out a scream. It was a primal, animalistic sound of pure rage. She lunged toward the bed, grabbing the rail. "You can't do this!" she shrieked, her face twisting into a mask of ugliness. "This is financial abuse. I will sue you. I will tell everyone what a monster you are. We have rights. We have squatters' rights. You can't just throw us on the street." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had wished for my death so she could remodel my kitchen. "You have no rights," I said softly. "You are not my blood. You are not my tenant. You are a guest who overstayed her welcome by about 3 years." I looked at the door. "Leonard, execute the order." Leonard pressed a button on the wall, the emergency call button usually reserved for cardiac arrests. But he didn't need a doctor. 2 security guards walked in. They were not the regular hospital security. I had hired private contractors for this specific moment. They were broad-shouldered and grim-faced. "Get them out of here," I said, waving my hand dismissively. "And if they resist, call the police. The restraining orders are already active." The guards moved in. One of them grabbed Brandon by the arm. Brandon burst into tears, loud, heaving sobs that sounded pathetic coming from a 38-year-old man. "Dad, no, please." "I am sorry." The other guard grabbed Tiffany. She tried to scratch him, her nails raking across his jacket. He didn't flinch. He pinned her arms to her sides and marched her toward the door. "You will rot in hell for this, Harry," she screamed, kicking and thrashing. "I hope you die alone. I am already alone," I thought. "And it is the most peaceful I have felt in years." Patricia suddenly recovered from her faint. She scrambled to her feet, realizing she was being left behind. She lunged for my hand, her nails digging into my skin. "Harry, baby, please, don't let them take me. I love you." I pulled my hand away, as if she were a burning coal. I looked her in the eye one last time. "The Harry you knew died on the floor of that CVS," I said. "The man standing here is just the executor of his estate, and you are not in the will." The guard took her arm. She wailed a high-pitched sound that echoed down the corridor as they were dragged out. I watched them go. I watched my son weeping and broken. I watched my wife begging and humiliated. I watched my daughter-in-law screaming obscenities. And then the door closed. The silence returned. But this time it wasn't heavy. It wasn't oppressive. It was clean. It felt like the air after a thunderstorm when the ozone is fresh and the dust has been washed away. I sat back down in the wheelchair, not because I had to, but because I wanted to rest. My legs were tired. My soul was tired. But my heart was beating steady and strong. Leonard walked over to the window and adjusted the blinds, letting a beam of afternoon sunlight hit the floor. He turned to me, a rare, genuine smile on his face. "That went well," he said. I looked at the blank TV screen. "Yes," I said. "It did." I reached for the glass of water on the bedside table. My hand didn't shake. So Leonard asked, "What now? The house is sold. The family is gone. You are officially homeless and bachelor #1 in Chicago." I took a sip of water. It tasted sweet. "Now," I said. "Now we finish the paperwork. And then Leonard." "Yes, Harry." "Book me a ticket." "Not a cruise. I hate boats. Book me a ticket to Italy. I have always wanted to see the Colosseum. I want to see something that has stood the test of time." "Unlike my marriage." Leonard chuckled. "First class," I smiled. "Is there any other way?" I closed my eyes, listening to the hum of the hospital. The execution was over. The dead weight was gone. I was 72 years old, and my life was just beginning. 6 months have passed since I sat in that hospital room and watched my family being escorted out by security. 6 months is a long time. It is enough time for a broken bone to knit back together. It is enough time to build a small house. And as it turns out, it is enough time to completely rewrite the ending of a life story. I am currently sitting on the aft deck of a 60-foot Sunseeker yacht, docked in the Florida Keys. The water is a shade of turquoise that looks fake, like something you would see on a postcard, but I know it is real because I can smell the salt in the air. The boat is mine. I didn't rent it. I bought it. I named her the Second Act. It seemed appropriate. The sun is warm on my face, a stark contrast to the gray chill of that hospital room in Chicago. I am wearing linen pants and a loose white shirt, the kind of clothes I used to think were frivolous, but now find incredibly comfortable. My cane is leaning against the railing, but I barely use it anymore. I walk 3 miles every morning on the beach. My blood pressure is lower than it has been in 20 years. Leonard is sitting across from me wearing a Hawaiian shirt that looks ridiculous on a man of his serious demeanor, but he seems happy. He is retired now, or at least semi-retired. He only has one client left. Me, and his job mostly consists of drinking iced tea and reading me the monthly reports on the 3 people who used to live in my house. We call it the Misery Index. It is my favorite time of the week. Leonard picks up a tablet and adjusts his glasses. He clears his throat, preparing to read the latest update on Brandon. "Your son completed 140 rides for Uber this week," Leonard says, scrolling through the data. His rating dropped to 4.6 stars because his car smells like fast food and he refused to help a passenger with their luggage. I take a sip of my wine. It is a crisp Sauvignon Blanc, much better than the swill they were drinking on that cruise ship. "And the payments?" I ask. Leonard nods. "Automatic garnishment is active. 20% of his gross earnings were transferred to your repayment account this morning. At this rate, he will pay off the $400,000 loan in approximately 42 years. I smile. It is not about the money. I donate every cent Brandon pays me to the Stroke Rehabilitation Center at St. Luke's. It is about the lesson. For the first time in his life, my son is waking up early. He is dealing with traffic. He is dealing with rude people who treat him like a servant. He is learning what it feels like to earn $1 the hard way. He lives in a studio apartment above a garage in Cicero. It is loud. It is cramped. And there is no maid to clean up his mess. He called me once 2 months ago crying, saying he couldn't take it anymore. I told him he could always get a second job. He hung up. He hasn't called back. "And Tiffany?" I ask. Leonard swipes the screen. "Ah, the lovely Tiffany. As predicted, she did not stick around for the poverty chapter of Brandon's life. She filed for divorce 3 days after you cut them off. She cited irreconcilable differences, which is legal. Speak for he is broke, and I am not sticking around to watch him sink. She moved back in with her mother, Leonard continues. But apparently, that didn't last long. Her mother doesn't have your patience or your bank account. Tiffany is currently working as a hostess at a chain restaurant in the suburbs. She is looking for a new husband, but word gets around fast in Lake Forest. Men with money know to stay away from her. She is radioactive. I watch a seagull dive into the water catching a fish. It is brutal, but it is nature. Predators survive until the prey fights back. And Patricia, I ask, saving the best for last. Leonard sighs, but I can see the satisfaction in his eyes. Patricia is currently on shift at Walmart. She is working the checkout lane. Apparently her feet are giving her trouble because she refuses to wear sensible shoes. She stands there for 8 hours a day, scanning milk and eggs and diapers for people who used to be her neighbors. I close my eyes and picture it. Patricia, who used to spend $500 on a lunch with her friends, now asking people if they want to donate $1 to charity at the register. She lives in a 1-bedroom apartment in a complex near the highway. It is noisy. The carpet is thin, and she is alone. The yoga instructor blocked her number the moment her credit card was declined on the ship. Her friends stopped calling when the party invitations stopped coming. She is living the life she always looked down on. Does she ask about me? I wonder aloud. Leonard shakes his head. She told a mutual acquaintance that you ruined her life. She plays the victim. She says you are a cruel, vindictive old man who threw her away like trash. I open my eyes and look at the woman coming up the stairs from the galley. It is Maria. She is holding a tray with fresh fruit and cheese. She is not wearing scrubs anymore. She is wearing a sundress. She looks 10 years younger than she did in the hospital. I hired her the day I left Chicago. I told her I didn't need a nurse, I needed a health manager. I pay her triple what the hospital paid her. She manages my diet, my exercise, and my schedule. She sends money back to her family every month, but she does it with pride, not entitlement. Maria sets the tray down and smiles at me. Mr. Caldwell, it is time for your afternoon walk. The sun is going down in an hour. I look at her. I look at Leonard. You know, Leonard, I say. Patricia is right. I did throw her away. But you don't keep the tumor just because it has been with you for 30 years. You cut it out so you can live. I reach for the glass of wine and hold it up to the light. The golden liquid shines against the backdrop of the ocean. People say blood is thicker than water. I say, my voice steady and reflective. They say family is everything. But they are wrong. Loyalty is everything. Respect is everything. Dignity is everything. Blood is just biology. I spent a lifetime trying to buy their love, trying to build a fortress to keep them safe. But I was just building a cage for myself. I look at the horizon where the sky is starting to turn a bruised purple. I lost a wife. I lost a son. I lost a daughter-in-law. By all accounts, I should be a broken, lonely old man. But I look around this boat. I look at the peace I feel when I wake up in the morning, knowing that nobody is waiting for me to die. Nobody is counting my days. Nobody is stealing from my pockets. I turn to Maria and Leonard. I lost a family, I say. But I found myself. And I think that is a fair trade. I pick up my sunglasses from the table. They are aviators, classic and cool. I put them on, shielding my eyes from the glare, but mostly shielding my soul from the past. I am ready for that walk, Maria, I say. I stand up. My legs are strong. My heart is light. I don't look back at the shore. I don't look back at Chicago. I don't look back at the wreckage of the Caldwell family. I look forward, to the ocean, to the sunset, to the rest of my life. I smile a real genuine smile that reaches all the way to my eyes behind the dark lenses. Freedom is not free, I whisper to the wind, but it is worth every penny. The screen goes black. We spend our lives building castles for the people we love, hoping the walls will keep them safe. But I learned the hard way that sometimes you are not building a home. You are just building a cage for your own spirit. Being a provider is not just about what you give. It is about what you tolerate. I thought money could buy loyalty, but it only rented their patience. If you are holding on to toxic relationships, just because you share a last name, let go. Your peace of mind is the only luxury that is truly priceless. You are never too old to start your second act. If you enjoyed this story of justice, please hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. I want to hear from you in the comments below. If your family left you behind for a vacation, would you have taken them back? Or would you have changed the locks just like I did? Let me know your thoughts. See you in the next story.